Hey, everyone, you got the memo. Those mics were hot. Luckily, you didn't say anything too off the wall. Well, good morning to everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We are literally a week away from our fall virtual conference. It kind of blows my mind that this would be the fourth time we're hosting our virtual conference. Once again, 100% free, 50 plus sessions led by industry experts, including the three gentlemen with me today. Huge thanks to Beer 30 by the Fifth Ingredient, Pneumatic Scale Angeles, and Pro Brew Supply for all their support on this. And we couldn't do it without all of you. Thanks for enjoying all this content that we're putting out, everything from brewing to business. And today we're going to have a really good conversation. And for the first time, I think, ever since I've hosted these panels, no one is in the same time zone as me. I think everybody is in a different place of the country. And Scott, first off, where are you and what do you do in the craft beer industry?
I am near the beer city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm in a suburb. I'm with Promote the Brew, and what we do is try to help breweries promote themselves via any digital format like geofencing or remarketing. We help with social media, websites, and we also do the hard goods. So hats, t-shirts, jackets, hoodies, all of the above.
Out of all of the above, what is your favorite to work on?
I like the geofencing. It's such a new technology. Well, I shouldn't say new technology. It's a new technology to the beer industry, and it's quite exciting to be able to kind of capture the information and see the conversions from other sites into the brewery, and being able to reach people in a new and different way.
Awesome. Well, I know you've presented on that before. We have a great presentation by Scott and his brother Steve in the archives, our YouTube channel, that goes over the geofencing, which is pretty entertaining and informative. I suggest you check it out. Now, Paul, I absolutely love that fancy backdrop you have behind you. The name of your company is cool. Very nicely. But what do you do and where are you?
Yeah, so we're actually located in Oslo, Norway. So we were talking about yesterday, but it's okay for me to have a beer. We're at that time zone.
It's okay for me too.
Yeah,
that's all three of us.
We're in the no judgment zone.
I've got mine right here.
And what does your company do?
Yeah, so in PLAATO, we develop technology that allows brewers to have a insight in the fermentation process. So we're building sensors, and we're building cloud solutions. So now we're launching a product called the PLAATO Pro, which is a plug and play device that measures the fermentation process in real time.
Well, excited to learn more about that at the conference.
Definitely.
And Seth, you and I spoke just an hour ago, and I appreciate you hanging out with me twice today. And you are in Albuquerque, New Mexico, as you told the world a few hours ago. But for everyone who didn't catch that, what do you do in the craft beverage industry?
So I'm an attorney. So I have a boutique law firm here. We do business law, and I got into the beer industry through my trademark practice. So I do a ton of work in the trademark space, a lot of it in the craft brewing space. So we do not only what we call prosecution filing for trademarks, but also, kind of clearance, brand strategy. I always like to talk about trademarks are just the legal structure for protecting a brand. So that brand is the important part. And so we just help people collect and hold on to the value that they're creating.
Very important stuff right there indeed. Now, because everyone is in a different part of the world for the most part, I'd love to hear, what you love most about your local craft beer scene. Besides the beer. I mean, obviously the beer is going to be delicious. It's the anchor of our industry. But what is your local craft beer scene doing right that you absolutely love?
I think the enthusiasm that we're seeing here is just amazing. Like, we're having small local festivals in the streets, and basically, especially here in Norway, and probably the same all over. The people in the beer industry and the craft beer industry, they're really together, and they have these very tight bonds, and they're more like friends than business partners, and I think this is amazing just to see how much joy and effort that's put into the industry.
And do you feel it's gotten stronger over the past 18 months, even through all these challenges?
Definitely. We see that they've had this energy to keep up and wait for better times.
Yeah, I like what I think what Paul's saying is true. It's compared to other industries, and often when I'm working in the trademark space, we're trying to discuss, let's just say, a potential conflict. And I find if it's two craft breweries involved in the discussion, they're at least going to try hard to resolve it in a pretty friendly, reasonable way. And I would say it is not nearly as likely to go that direction if there's a party in another industry involved in the discussion. I would also like to say that one of the things I really love about the craft industry is I think one of the most endangered experiences in modern life is just sort of an authentic experience. And craft beer is fundamentally authentic because if you come in to visit me, I'm not going to go take you to some chain restaurant. I'm certainly not going to go take you to some that's serving, mega beer. And I think if I went and visited Paul or Scott, I would also probably wind up at a local craft brewery. And, just knowing that somebody who lives in that city made that product and probably isn't like, punching out new locations, all over the Southwestern United States or whatever, that means something to me. I think it means something to all of us to go find a place, and I can go into any place in the country and go, is there a craft brewery around here? And even if it's not spectacular, it's going to be in terms of product quality or consistency, it's fun to go have that local experience.
No, I couldn't agree more, Seth. I think that's why we're all here together today. We all have a passion for the craft beer industry, and we all do completely different things. But we all come together over the love for craft beer to see the industry continue to grow.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, Scott, up in Wisconsin, what's going good up there?
Well, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Wisconsin, but Wisconsin has a long lineage of beer. Back in the 1800s, there were a lot of small breweries that started. G. Heilemann Brewing Company, Blatz, Melms. There was this Friedrich Miller guy that started a brand. And so for years, the craft beer industry was growing, and through closings, mergers, and acquisitions, it all kind of boiled down to Miller Brewing and maybe a couple of other regionals. And then, back in the 80s, when the laws changed and people started to come back out, we started to see this resurgence. And so, some of the early ones in Wisconsin were Sprecher, New Glarus, Lakefront, just to mention a few that I can think of off the top of my head. And I apologize to anybody I forgot. But we've had a growing beer scene, and Wisconsin always had the small corner bar that was loyal to Pabst or to Miller or to one of the other brands. And it was, you'd work your 8 to 4:30 or 9 to 5. And on the way home, you'd stop at that local bar and have a beer with your buddies before you went home for dinner. It was a family gathering place. The kids were playing on the pool table on the weekends, and the parents were gathering with friends, and a great sense of community. And we're seeing that it's moved from the corner bar to the corner brewery. And so that whole sense of community that was somewhat lost for a while when the behemoths were running the beer market, that we're starting to see again coming into that tap room. And it's such a great experience. And what I love about it is no two tap rooms are the same. You get a different experience everywhere you go. And so it's such a great place to take people that aren't familiar with the beer scene to kind of introduce them to the beer scene.
No, I love it. I've had that experience. You mentioned New Glarus. I've been to New Glarus actually twice. I love visiting small towns, and I love going abroad. So Paul, I'm going to come see you one day too. But New Glarus really stood out to me when I went. I've been twice for the fact that it had that small town vibe. And just like you described, that small corner bar feel where everybody just comes together. And That's an amazing feeling when you come together, just like we have today, to share your after work beer, your Saturday with a family. It's something special, and you're creating memories.
Exactly.
So all of you, none of you actually work at a brewery, and it's been a very challenging year for the brewers, of course, year and a half, if not longer at this point. But how have you been able to successfully maintain relationships through the pandemic, whether personally or with the brewers you provide, value to?
I think it's being open to technology. I think, Zoom meetings, Google Meets, being available. It's been such a tough year, and people have had such a crazy upheaval of their lives that we've had to adjust our lives in order to work with the different people. And, the worst thing, I think, and everybody will agree with this, I hope that between March and the end of last year, you'd email somebody and you get a bounce. And then in following up with the brewery, you'd find out either A, they've been laid off, or B, they've been let go. And so some of those relationships you had established over the past couple of years are gone. And so now you're trying to reestablish a relationship with somebody you hadn't worked with but might have known about you in the past. So it's been a lot of reintroduction and rebuilding of relationships. And Andrew, every time I'm on one of your panels or on a presentation, what you're doing is such a blessing in the craft beer industry, because
you need to stop right now, Scott. Stop.
Because you do it in such an open and transparent way. There's no hidden agenda. It's just people talking about things that they love and things that they do. And we see this daily in the Facebook feed. So we're very appreciative to always be a part of these panels, as I imagine the other two gentlemen are as well.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's truly from insight, like the three of yours and everyone else in the community, that we learn from each other. There's so many people with unique insight, expertise, and even opinions in the craft beverage space that we need to be listening to each other. If we just talk to our neighbors, we're going to be recycling the same strategies. I think it's really important to reach outside your region, but also outside your comfort zone and learn from others, because that's how we truly grow and innovate. And I think that's absolutely necessary right now where we are in the craft beverage world.
Exactly.
One of the interesting things that we saw here is that during the lockdown, people were more interested in figuring out about their local breweries. How can I support them? What kind of beer can I buy that is really made in my city? So actually, some of the breweries they sold more beer during the lockdown. People buying it in the stores, bringing it home. And one more interesting thing is this with home brewing. Actually booming a bit during the lockdown. People have more time. So that's pretty interesting. We saw kind of an increase of communication between new homebrewers and the craft brewing industry. Basically, how can I make beer at home, and then how can I learn from you guys that's in the same city as myself? So
now, for your business model, I know you started in the homebrew world, Paul.
Yep.
Had you planned to ultimately grow to working with craft brewers, or when did you realize that opportunity?
That was actually the purpose all along, to actually begin with the craft brewing industry. But we chose to go for the homebrewers first, because that was basically a decision to focus on one thing at the time. And that was really good, because we got like the typical thing is that homebrewers, they have access to more digital equipment than many craft brewers actually. and I was like, hey, I'm a home brewer, and I can go and buy more advanced, affordable equipment than the bigger ones can. So, yeah.
That's a really fascinating point you just made.
It is, yeah, definitely.
Do you feel many brewers would agree with that statement?
Absolutely. There's a big gap. You have the home brewing stuff, like things that you wouldn't rely on for a industrial production. And then you have the kind of the expensive PLC systems on the other hand, which is far too expensive. So there's been a lack of something in the middle there.
That's fascinating. So I guess during the pandemic and maybe even continuing now, has it been easier to reach the craft brewer to, educate them on what you're doing? Or how have you been able to kind of build those relationships in the larger brewery space through the past 18 months?
So we experienced a significant dip in March 2020 for the craft brewers as well, just because of the uncertain times. But we saw a real increase in reach outs from basically when people started learning that having access to data and having access to this automatically allows for easier control when you're not able to be in the brewery all the time. Maybe the travel restrictions are different, and also of course meeting up with other people. So yeah, that was really interesting to see.
Awesome, fascinating. And Seth, how about you? How have you been able to maintain relationships both personally and professionally through the pandemic?
Well, I kind of think about it as local clients and not so local clients. So I'm fortunate to live in a relatively small state, but a pretty rich craft brew scene. But I have I tend to, unlike a lot of other practices, I tend to develop pretty good relationships, personal relationships with some clients. And so even if we weren't in the brewery or and generally I don't tell them where my office is because I always, why would you have a brewer come to a law office? Like, I go see you. But we wound up doing a lot of hiking and skiing, and my friend of mine and I did a little bike tour one day in the middle of lockdown where we rode to 4 different breweries. It was like a 25-mile ride and picked up 4 or 6 pack at each place, and just kind of a way to kind of keep in touch with people. So that was relatively easy. Because our practice is kind of, most of what I do is federal law, so I've got clients in Tennessee and Florida and whatever. For those people, we had to keep in touch, obviously via electronic stuff. And what I think is interesting is they probably had even more interest in brand and brand protection issues, because as you ran away from, or as you were unable to sell in over the counter at the tap room, and you had to sell through distribution, whether it's self-distribution or otherwise, then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I had that really cool Hefeweizen, what was it called? And you want to be able to establish that brand, be able to protect that brand, and monitor that brand. So initially lockdown happened, everyone panicked, everything froze, but by the summer of 2020, we were getting pretty busy, and just like Paul said, people were actually buying more beer, but they were buying most of it in cans. So we had a can shortage. We had a bunch of the USPTO is backed up an additional 60 or 90 days on most trademarks. So that's not 60 or 90 days. That's an additional 60 or 90 days. So we saw a lot of that going on. So we had to be a little bit more proactive in terms of getting in front of people electronically, and also receiving information electronically. We did more monitoring, more of those types of things, and we saw more issues crop up.
We'll have to dive into those issues shortly, but first, I'd like to welcome Thomas to the stage. Thomas is giving a talk next week on being a brewery owner while also running a 9-to-5 job. So I think your appearance right now really speaks to the challenges that you probably deal with on the daily. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. I just scheduling faux pas on my part, right? So juggling 2 calendars, one's the brewery, or 3 actually, brewery, personal and work calendar. So appreciate the patience.
No, glad you're here now, Thomas. So what do? You either start with the brewing side of things or start with the other side of things. We'd love to learn.
Yeah, so I think they kind of dovetail together, but I work in biotech, and a long time ago, always had a passion for beer. And basically a couple of years ago, a few friends and I got together and we found a brewery that was for sale, which was basically the only way that it was going to work, right? Is we didn't have the bandwidth to kind of build it from scratch. So we purchased an existing brewery, a very small one, but it had everything in place: a general manager for the tap room, a brewmaster, and really we just kind of got to do all the unfun stuff, I guess you could say, right? The paperwork, the licensing, the dealing with regulatory agencies, HR, all that, and didn't really get to do so much of the fun stuff like the brewing or interacting with the customers in the tap room. But yeah, so it's a small little brewery, 7-barrel system out in Southern California. But really enjoy it. It's a great challenge, but it can be stressful at times when you mess up your calendar and forget about things.
Well, I think that's a challenge of technology these days too, because every now and then we have glitches as well. While there is human error, there's things that our calendars mess up on sometimes. I know we've been doing this Zoom thing for quite some time now, and it still blows my mind how I have to deal with some of the error messages and glitches that occur, while we're on a call.
Absolutely.
But
well, excited to be here.
No, glad to have you. We've talked a little bit about, how everyone's maintained relationships over the past year, but, one thing I'd love to hear from all of you, personally and professionally, what have been some of the challenges you've faced over the past 18 months? The more specific, the better. We can talk generalities all day long because it's been a tough 18 months, but, something close to home. I'd love to hear what you're experiencing personally. And Scott, because you chose to unmute, you're up.
All right. For me, it was a little bit different than for most people because I've been working out of my house since 2014. So a lot of people had to adapt to the work from home new business style. And so I was pretty much set. I did coach quite a few people on work from home and, setting up a space that's separate from the rest of your house and taking away some of the distractions. What I often hear from a lot of people is I got up to go get a cup of coffee and spend 2 hours working on this, and so they spent a lot of time away from work, and you really have to be motivated and you have to stay focused. And, I have scratch pads full of notes and checklists and things that keep me focused on what I need to get done during the day. And I still don't get things done, and I still forget things, and I still drop the ball on occasion. And I think, that was probably the biggest challenge during 2018 or 2020 was the fact that, because it was so hard to reach people that you'd spend the morning trying to reach out to people and you wouldn't get a hold of anybody. And so you'd kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to work on this stuff then in the afternoon and try again tomorrow and see if I have better luck. And then you get distracted and you spend 6 hours on something you probably should have spent an hour on. And it was just one of those things, one of the things that we did is we were doing webinars for our merchandise workshop, and then for our empowered buyer workshop and our social media workshops. And so we converted all of those to study at your own pace online courses so that people wouldn't have to go, okay, I've got to be on a Zoom call from this time to this time. And Paul, you understand, it's really hard being out of the country, when you're 6 hours ahead of us to try and get into a meeting that somebody schedules at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yep.
And the converse is, if I'm trying to work with a brewery in Hawaii where they're 6 hours behind, where's that sweet spot? So by putting everything online, we were able to accommodate people globally that still wanted the information, wanted to go through the workshop, but the webinar just wasn't working. And, we would have thought the converse was true with people having more time, that webinars would have been better. But, from what we heard, people didn't want to, and it might've been because family and issues at home, but they didn't want to commit to being in a seminar for a specific period of time. They just wanted to do it at their own pace.
So I think that's very, very true, Scott. I think people right now are, I don't want to call them not as engaged, but the live engagement is definitely down. In April 2020, you might as well watch us on a screen on 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. But people have learned that a lot of this content, whether webinars or the content we put out in Craft Beer Professionals, you can go back and watch it at any point in time at your own pace. And I think that's beautiful. While it's great to be able to tune in and ask questions, I think everyone here today or in all these webinars, they also love it when you reach out via email and ask any question you may have. We want that in human interaction, and that engagement's really important. But Scott, as you were talking earlier, I also felt like you were kind of peeking in my window. You were talking about people going downstairs, grabbing a cup of coffee, getting distracted, diving 6 hours on a project when you should be working on something else. I think that's very, very true. And one thing you mentioned that helped you is having notepads with checklists. And I want to ask you a piece of advice. How do you keep your notepads and checklist organized?
Well, it's a system I used when I was in college. And one of the things that I used to do when I used to write papers, because I'm dyslexic, and so I have to be very careful because I'm always flipping things when I shouldn't be. So I would use dry erase boards, and at a couple of places I would use dry erase markers in Windows, and then I would use sticky notes because you can move sticky notes where you could do titles and stuff. So I've kind of done the same thing where I use sticky notes and I use 3x5 cards. And so 3x5 cards are for customers. Sticky notes are for action items. So what I'll do is I'll pull out a stack of 3x5 cards and know what I have to get done today, and then be able to put those in order. And then whatever I don't get done, I put into the stack for tomorrow, and then I prioritize tomorrow, and then I sticky note things that have to get done, and then I make sure I check them off during the day. And anything that's on a sticky note, then I rewrite for the next day with priorities on that too, because, you know, my calendar shows me what I have to do at certain times, but it doesn't give me the data of that person and the last conversation. So I'm still kind of in the old technology because I haven't found a CRM system that really works well with Google, works well with social media. So for me, it's like I'll look on someone's Facebook page, I'll look at their Instagram page, I'll look at their LinkedIn page, and then I'll look at my notes, and then I'll hop on a call and I'll say, hey, I noticed you posted this the other day, or I noticed you were talking about this issue, and that's a great way to have a conversation with somebody. And, I've been called a troller before, but I just think that, we always explain it this way. Facebook is the family photo on someone's desk. LinkedIn is their office. And so there's nothing wrong with taking a look at the family photo and mentioning something in a conversation. And so we use these tools as business professionals as we're trying to build those relationships, especially during 2020 when it was so difficult to talk about anything other than COVID and shutdown and money and kids. It kind of got to the point where you could talk about a business issue that was affecting them that wasn't in the basket that everybody else was talking about.
No, a lot of great insight there. And, even with you said them unique systems, you're quite organized in the way you have them set up. You have methods to your madness.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. So, if you find something that works and that you're successful at it, stick with it.
Absolutely. And so for everyone else here today, to go back to the original question, what's a challenge you've experienced personally? I'd love to hear about, something you've struggled with, something you've, faced that you didn't expect to face.
COVID related you're talking about?
Doesn't have to be. I mean, just over the past year and a half, I'd love to hear, a challenge that you're facing, Seth.
So one of the challenges that we've faced, this is kind of ironic, but many of the things that we thought was going to happen early in COVID wound up being the reverse. Like everyone thought that we'd be we would be scrambling to try to get enough business to employ our people, but it turns out that many breweries have more business than they can find people to work in. So we actually hired a new attorney during COVID, and we had to, because our practice had grown, which was kind of snuck up on us. We had hadn't expanded our office and so forth, thinking things were going to be slow, and suddenly we had more business, and we still weren't coming into the office. So we had to figure out how to integrate someone into our team and train them. And what I thought was interesting is to kind of understand where the digital and the face-to-face interface happens. Like I've made friends online, like actual real friendships over the past year, where previously you'd meet people and you'd like then maybe link in. But I belong to a trademark lawyers group through a CRM that we use for trademark monitoring, and they had these webinars once with these very helpful CLE eligible webinars, and it's just like in the real world, I'd go sit in the back of class and find the people who are sitting in the back of class, and I'd go chatter with them and be disruptive with my people, right? And now we're doing the same thing. We were doing it on chat, right? And so like anybody could see and talk crap about us, but and then we would internally we would Slack with our other friends. So I think one of the things that was interesting is to kind of learn how to make a friend online in a completely digital environment, and that's much harder, much more challenging. And you talked a little bit about the way people consume content. We go to live events to meet, to create those things. When we consume recorded content, we kind of want indexes. We're like, oh, I'm going to this thing about location-based marketing. I want to learn about how to create a larger owned audience. I want to skip right to that spot and maybe watch that, but also read the chat, because I don't want to sit through the whole 40-minute thing right now. So I think understanding how to kind of balance those things has been a challenge for a lot of us. And I think it's why, like Scott said, we tend to go, oh, I'm gonna spend 30 minutes doing this. And the next day, you're like, oh, I'm still working on this thing, because you didn't know what you didn't know. It got kind of interesting or challenging, and so you just sort of get sucked in.
Very, very true on everything you said just now. I can relate.
I can go in terms of challenges, maybe as a result of the last 2 years. I'm going to speak a little more specifically to the brewery, and it actually dovetails with the tail end of the conversation I heard as I was joining about just the changing demand that we saw. So we ended up, when COVID hit, probably doing the same amount of barrelage, but it was just in completely different, like flip-flopped, the packaging. And as a small brewery, there were challenges, but it was also like we were able to handle it. But it was literally me and our master brewer and anybody we could find, like hand canning, beer, and just really that one can at a time, like fill it, CO2. Like it was actually pretty crazy looking back on it. But that, I think, was the challenge, because not only did we have to, let's say before 90%, 95% of our beer went into kegs, we had to flip that and do 95% of it into cans. So we just really weren't built for that kind of a volume, because nobody's taking a keg. The bars are all closed. Nobody's coming into the tap room. We tried to do growler fills, but it's just, that's not as sustainable or as easy as people walking up and picking a fork back. So that was the initial challenge. And then the worst part is kind of the seesaw, or the whipsaw, let's call it, where, okay, you're open now. And so we don't have any beer in kegs. And it's probably about a 3 to 4 week lead time, when you make a packaging decision of what that beer is going to go into. So it was really just this kind of whole whipsaw through COVID of, okay, put everything in cans. All right, now you can have it in kegs again. We don't have any kegs. And then we get closed out again. So it's put everything in cans. We don't have any cans. So that was definitely a very unique challenge. I think we learned a lot. I'll take that. Like I can tell you more about canning and just the mechanics around that than I thought we would ever learn, which is setting us up for really expanding our output now that we're in this, let's call it post-COVID purgatory, right? Where we're kind of out of COVID, but we're not really out of COVID. But anyway, it was definitely very challenging, but extremely, extremely insightful in terms of the things that we learned and kind of how to evolve our business.
On a personal note, Thomas, as someone who wears 2 different hats, your biotech hat and your brewing hat, have you found different strategies to balance over the past year and a half that you weren't using prior?
The easiest thing that I could say, it's probably a lot saying no to other things. You know, where it's as silly as it's like not watching a lot of TV these days, right? But it's kind of picking and choosing those things that are exciting and those things that I have the bandwidth for. And then also having the right team, you know, like I said, with it was me, it was the brewmaster, it was any of the tap room staff that, you know, didn't have a job because they couldn't work in the tap room.
No, that's very good insight there. I mean, just simply saying no. I know pre-COVID, you know, I didn't have a dull moment in my night. If I had a free night, I'd find something to do. I think the past 18 months has taught me to say no, take a step back for my mental well-being, my family, and my personal goals outside of just, you know, being around everyone at every moment. So I think there's definitely been some good from it.
Absolutely.
Hey, Thomas, quick question. Did you have any trouble finding growlers, and cans?
So we sort of did, but we were so small that I don't like, we could kind of get the stuff that fell off the back of the truck. And you know, we did everything from shrink wrapped cans to blank cans where we'd go print labels and hand apply the labels to the cans. We did bottling, you know, where we'd find like it was literally all hands on deck. You know, if it was a clean container that we could put beer in and seal the top, we pretty much figured out how to do it. So I would say that we kind of had issues, but I think we were just so small that, you know, we're ordering a pallet of cans and they were like, well, we can't get them to you in time. We're like, well, we'll take blank cans. So it was kind of, we were able to be flexible, which really helped us.
Paul, how about you? You've mentioned, you know, how it was a good thing for the homebrewing community because so many people took to the hobby during the pandemic. But, you know, looking at the other side of things, that was obviously a positive. What was a challenge that you unexpectedly faced over the past year?
Well, we were really mentally prepared to go to CBC.
Yeah, I didn't see you there. What's up with that?
Yeah. And with 2 times, like we were supposed to go this year as well, but it was just impossible for us to travel, unfortunately.
We missed you. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah,
Seth.
I didn't see Seth, but Scott and I had a blast. You know, we were looking for you all over the place.
Yeah. So basically being part of the community where the brewers meet each other, have a beer, get to know each other. I think missing out on that part of this fun journey was a bit tough. And also being able to travel over to the US, especially meeting up with everyone. We've had some relationships that been going on for a couple of years, and it's always nice to have a beer and then yeah, but going forward, luckily it seems to be the right way, and it's nice to have a cold beer again.
Yeah. So through challenges come innovation. So how have you found unique ways to connect with others? We've all talked about Zoom, but you know, what's a strategy that you've employed at the company that's been successful?
Yeah. So actually, what was mentioned here today is a big. It's been really important for us, actually. Just being able to talk with brewers all over the world on a common platform, just like Zoom, or and also being able to schedule meetings on a short notice digitally. It kind of opens up the world on a very different way. Previously, we would typically like to travel around and then get that kind of physical knowledge in a way, but right now that's not possible. So I think it's been kind of a benefit for those companies that's been able to survive.
I love the challenges faced, not necessarily because we have to face them, but a challenge means you hopefully grow from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, looking at, you know, everything we've been through, we've relied so much on technology. You know, we've used things like Zoom. I've relied on this platform, StreamYard, so much. I also fell in love with my Google Calendar, which I never used prior, and I'm thankful for it now. And I also use Calendly, which has been a fantastic scheduling tool. But for the four of you, outside of things like Zoom, what technology or apps have helped save the day in your life?
Ruby.
What is Ruby? I'm not familiar.
Ruby is it's a live receptionist as a service. So we'll call it RAS, right? So it's so for a period of time we weren't coming to the office, so we didn't have a legal assistant, and so we set up this Ruby app, which is amazing because if you call me on my office number, a human being answers the phone, and they try to reach me, or they look at my calendar, they tell you that I'm busy, and they can schedule a call. So I get a really nice feedback, and now we do have a full office staff, but our office staff is working on document production and things like that, and not being interrupted by random phone calls. So that's been it's much better than voicemail. It's much better than a call tree. It's not free, but it's not, given the amount of time it saves and the amount of the ability, if someone calls and is having a panic attack, they can really drill down and try to find us. And the fact that they have access to our calendars actually, so they can schedule appointments for us. And so if you call and don't leave me a message and don't set up an appointment, I get a little signal that it wasn't really that important, right? Like it's probably something else. So that's been really cool. It is better than Google Voice and better than a lot of other things, and actually saves us time, valuable admin time, and it's been a cool thing.
You've touched on two really important things there. You talked about the efficiencies and how it saved you time, but also that human interaction component. I think we all like talking to someone, even if it's just a receptionist for a couple of seconds. It's better than, that robot on the other end sometimes.
Well, and it's kind of the idea that technology allows you to deploy the best to the best in the best place. So there's there's a lot of communities that I'm involved with. I'm involved with obviously the legal community and the beer community and so forth. So the technology community and the fitness community are also things that I'm involved with. And I'm obsessed with how Peloton has figured out this business model, which was fundamentally about, like, damn, I can't work out in New York City unless I get up at 5 a.m. to get there for one of the 21 slots for a in-person spin class for the best instructor, or one of the better instructors. And the frustration is, like, the best instructor in the city can only has 25 people they can teach to. So they created this idea that they can really find the top tier talent and pay them really well, because they can teach 400 people at a time, and with evergreen content and actual live human interaction. Like, that's brilliant. That was an amazing unbundling of things. And sure, it's not for everyone and everything. But the other thing that I think, and this is true of Peloton and Core Yoga and Ruby and Zoom and everything else, as we get back to not being sequestered and masked and everything else, there is some number of face-to-face meetings greater than 0 that will never take place face-to-face again. Like we're not going to wipe them out for sure. We still want face-to-face meetings, but there's a lot of them that we don't have to do face-to-face, and that have a ton of friction involved, whether it's driving across whatever your bridge, freeway thing, that pain in the butt thing, or getting on an airplane or something. Doesn't need to be. Like, it's actually better, nicer, faster, more efficient to be online. So all of those things where it benefits your, we'll say, customer, wherever if I'm providing the value, I want to provide value to you. And if you get more value by not having to meet me someplace, great. Like, that's fantastic. I think we all have to think about that too. A lot of times we want that interaction because it's better for us, but it might not be better for our customer.
Really great insight and great tips there. Now, Thomas, I want to throw it to you now, because you work that 9 to 5, but you also work at the brewery where engagement is absolutely vital at so many levels. What technologies or apps have kind of helped save your life the past 18 months?
What we've started using at the brewery a lot is Slack. It's the free messaging, basically kind of messaging communication tool. that has been, pretty much a lifesaver when it comes to, being in disparate locations. Folks, it's kind of a real time. Taproom staff can just go in and leave a message and say, "Hey, we're out of bleach," right at the end of their shift, and then you can get it the next morning. But also, we release a new beer, so we can have a beer channel where we put in, here's the new beer, here's all the specs on it. So it's not only is it kind of instantaneous communication, it's also really easy to go back and find information, right? So you can search, what hop did we use for this round of the, B Street, which is our, pineapple blonde, right? So it's really, I think it's just done a lot to solidify the relationships and the communication when, I can't always be there on site. Let's say that we're hiring new staff and maybe, I haven't had a chance to meet them face to face just yet, but, we can at least exchange some conversations on Slack. So from a communication standpoint, that's been extremely, extremely valuable, and the price is right at $3.99. So we can definitely fit that one into our budget.
Yeah, I can agree to that. The price is right, but I definitely think there's value. If there are added perks of paying for it, definitely consider that. I know I use Calendly, the free version, but a couple times a year I will upgrade to get some added features. Now, Thomas, I have a question with regard to Slack for you. When I get a text message on my phone, then 10 minutes later I look down, I see a thread between some friends, and I have 10 messages to catch up on. Does that ever stress you out? And does you have to deal with the same thing in Slack, and strategies for dealing with like a long thread to catch up on?
Yeah. So number one, I don't get push notifications. And the best way that I've heard this described is like, checking messages and responding to stuff is kind of like doing laundry. You don't just wash one sock at a time and, respond to every single message as soon as it shows up. So I try to batch it, and say, okay, I'm going to respond to brewery stuff for this 30 minutes. And you can pretty quickly, you see a thread that maybe you didn't need to be a part of, right? So you can, the switching cost of moving from one thing to the other is a lot lower because I'm focused on brewery and it's really easy. So that's probably the biggest way that I deal with that is no push notifications, because otherwise, your phone is just bing, 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 bing the whole time.
One of the tips that I took early in the pandemic, we had a panel on mental health in the craft beer industry. I think it was December of last year. And I believe it was Joel Frieders, who's very passionate about mental health in the industry. He told me to cut my Facebook notifications off, because simply looking at my phone and seeing that I have 15 different unread notifications would stress me out. So the fact that I don't see it, it makes my life easier. And granted, I still check my phone a lot. I don't think I check it at the same level as I did last December. So it's a good tip there, cutting the notifications off.
Yeah, that's that way you can kind of dictate when you use your phone as opposed to it dictating what you do.
Paul, how about you? What technology, in apps have you utilized other than your own?
We've used this email technology quite a lot.
Email, is that something new for you?
It's gonna be big.
It's pretty big one. No, but the same as you guys are saying here. Calendly, I remember finding that app and just like, wow, this is just like, it just changes the way you're able to meet with people. And also Slack is a vital part of the company here. And but I think Calendly, it's been interesting how a small app like that just really helps with efficiency and also late night calls at 9 p.m. With other time zones.
Yeah, I'm sure you have different challenges with regard to getting in a good schedule that we could speak to in a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, but it's not the worst. We have possibility to talk with both sides of the world from Europe. So yeah, it's our salespeople on working 24/7.
Well, Scott, I know a lot of your technologies look a lot like this, but do you have anything that you would recommend or have found useful in your world to help, make it easier?
As a matter of fact, yes. I do love the Calendly app.
This episode of Crappy Professionals was not paid by Calendly at all.
No, but what I like about it is it replaces the 6 emails it used to take to try and get something on the calendar. And, when people would send me these links to their calendars, unsolicited used to irritate the crap out of me. And so I'm very careful of sending my Calendly link only to people that are ready to set up a time to talk. I think that too early in the conversation, it can be off-putting. So I'm very careful of that. And one of the other tools we've been using is Zoom allows you to record the conversation. And so I think that as a salesperson, I can be really present in the conversation when I'm not having to worry about taking notes. And so what we do is we save the recording and then we send it to a transcription company that transcribes the conversation into notes. And then therefore we have an actionable document that we can use after the fact in order to follow up and have all the information that we need, and then can build follow-up questions for the next conversation that we have. And that has been hugely, hugely helpful. Because, as a salesperson, you're thinking about the next question, or you're writing down a note and you miss something that was said. So in my world, that has been hugely helpful.
A really good insight there. The transcription idea is very clever. I mean, sometimes it's hard to remember exactly what someone said in a conversation. To be able to go and actually Control F and search it, or search certain words, can be very nice. Now, Thomas, because you are the only brewery owner in the room, and I know at your brewery, you're one of a billion brewery owners, which makes you in a unique situation. But, how do you feel about the next year we have coming forward? What are you looking forward to?
So I think the main thing that I'm really excited about is demand. Feels like it's back to where we were pre-COVID. We did see, like I said, the barrelage stayed the same, and then it was kind of fluctuation of where the barrelage went. But I think demand is back, and I think there's also a revitalized sense of shop and help local, help small, where when folks have a choice between grabbing maybe what we would consider a macro beer, which at our level is basically even regional players, right? But I think people really see the benefit of helping a small business and knowing that those dollars that they spend there have a greater impact. So I'm definitely excited about that. I think having an outsized community impact, but also like making sure that we're doing our part, right, as a small business to not only are we there in the community, but we're also additive to the community, right? If there's things that we can do with the city to improve, things with the local universities, we want to make sure we're a part of it. So generally optimistic about all of those things.
I think the local partnerships are a whole nother avenue we could talk about probably for another hour. I think building relationships outside of those in the beer world, where you have unique audiences that you both bring to the same place, are extremely valuable.
Absolutely.
So wind down with one final question. I always like to end on a positive note. So I'm going to ask each of you just briefly, what's been a positive from your life, like I like to say, personally or professionally, over the past year and a half? Something that's been something good that's happened to you, or something you've experienced that, made your life a little bit better. Scott, because you started us off earlier, you're first. No prep time at all.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate all the time you've given me to think about this. On a personal side, my niece just had twin boys, identical. So that's been kind of exciting. She went through the period of COVID with the two of them in there incubating for the 9 months, and watching, the new world order as it comes to being pregnant and delivering kids. And, one of the questions I keep asking myself is, how is this going to affect young kids who don't get to see people's faces out in public? All they see are masks. And, how is that going to affect them growing up? And so that's a whole other thing. On the professional side, the new energy, the new excitement, everything that's coming together is a lot of fun. And the geofencing, I hate to keep talking about geofencing, but I think this is so exciting because a lot of breweries have found out that there's a lot of people in their community still don't know they're there. And I think that, you know, if you're looking to reach new people, geofencing is a way to get those people into your tap room. And then one other thing I just want to mention, when Andrew and I met in Denver, we met at a coffee shop, and the coffee shop had a bunch of people that were working, professionals that were working, and they also had a little room with a glass door that people could go into to make phone calls or get on a conference call over their computer that was a quiet room. And I've been talking to the breweries that I work with that if this work from home or remote working continues to be a thing, that you should really seriously look at a section of your tap room that you could make more business professional accommodating for groups, that they could come instead of a coffee shop to your tap room, especially if you're serving lunch. They come for lunch, they stay for the afternoon. When they shut their laptop down, they have a couple of beers before they go home, but then give them a space that if they need to get away from the sound of a tap room, that they can go to. I think that this is something in the future that I think would be really impactful to tap rooms.
Absolutely. Well, Seth, I know you have a hard stop on the hour, so I'm going to let you get your answer in right now.
So thanks, Andrew. So in the middle of COVID, I met up with a friend of mine, and we were talking about COVID, and he said, the best thing about COVID is there's a lot fewer douchebags in my life right now, and I'm going to keep it that way. And I just think that was so brilliant, because, you know, you realize that we put up with a lot of stuff because we think it had to be that way, and then, you know, you wind up in a little bit of a reset situation, and you realize it's going to go back. We're going to have the opportunity to go back and be exactly like it was, but you don't need to let it go back to exactly like it was. And I just, I've never forgotten that moment. He didn't think about it. He just said it. And I'm taking that with me.
Yeah, I love it, because it's those little takeaways that can make our lives better.
Right. All right, gentlemen.
Appreciate you joining today, and see you next week.
Yeah, look forward to it. Bye, guys.
Paul, we'll get back to order. So you're up, Paul.
Yeah. Well, good. I like the one about the douchebags. I think actually some of the things that we've seen is that there's a lot of cool apocalyptic beer names coming out, and some new like dark styles that are really a bit seasonal to the COVID-19, which I think is really cool. And also a bit what I mentioned on like this ownership to their own, like to the city where people live. I think this has been one of the it's been amazing to see how the communities really tried to take care of their breweries and businesses.
Oh, I guess we lost Thomas. I know he did have a lot of positives in the past year, because we've had quite a few conversations since then. But if Thomas doesn't tune in just one sec, be sure to catch Thomas next week at our virtual conference. He's going to be talking about the challenges and solutions of running a 9-to-5, or running a brewery while also holding down a 9-to-5. So at this point in time, we've hit that hour mark, and Scott and Paul and Seth and Thomas, wherever you two may be, I appreciate the insight you provided today. We have so much to learn from one another, and I look forward to your presentations both next week, and look forward to that beer in person soon. So I'll see you both before too long.
We'll do
Thanks.
that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.